Hello and welcome to Top Story. Is the time for talking about the future of Kosovo, the predominantly Albanian-populated province of Serbia, over? According to the United States, the European Union and the people of Kosovo, the answer is clearly yes. According to Serbia and Russia, just as clearly no. But whatever the case, today marks the UN's deadline for talks on Kosovo's status to end. International mediators reported on Friday that their efforts to negotiate a settlement had failed. Serbia refuses to offer the Kosovars more than autonomy, and Kosovo is now expected to declare independence, though probably not before early 2008. The EU and the US support a plan put forward by the UN's top administrator in Kosovo, Marti Ahtisaari. It calls for supervised independence, in which an EU police force will provide support for a gradual transition to independence, while at the same time safeguarding the rights and property of Kosovo's Serbian minority. Russia opposes the plan. Well, joining me now to discuss where the failure to reach an agreement on Kosovo's final status leaves the Balkans is Jacques Rupnik, who is a member of the Independent International Commission on Kosovo and is now Director of Studies at the Centre for International Research at Sciences Po here in Paris. Thanks very much for being on Top Story. The UN for the deadline on Kosovo is now over. Can we expect an imminent declaration of independence from Kosovo, or do you think there's some time to go yet?
There's still some time to go because the UN will actually decide in about 10 days what it will do with the conclusion of these negotiations. And I wouldn't expect anything on the Albanian side, on the Kosovo-Albanian side, till January. But they have said on several occasions that for them the only option was independence. So the question was for them, will they get an international blessing for it, or will they go unilaterally? And that entails a number of risks. And
presumably there's a lot of international pressure on the Kosovars not to go ahead before there is international agreement, or at least international support, primarily, I imagine, from the EU and from the US.
Yes, definitely. There is every attempt to build a consensus, but clearly there is no international consensus at the UN because Russia simply will not support a UN resolution that would back independence for Kosovo. If you don't have a UN resolution, and this is where the problems really start, is you might have a number of European countries that will be in two minds about supporting Kosovo independence.
This is still a danger, you think?
And this is still a danger. This is where the Europeans will have to do a lot of internal work within the EU to elaborate a common position. Until then, it was fairly simple. The Europeans backed the Ahtisaari plan. The Ahtisaari plan was supposed to get the endorsement from the UN, and we were going to march onwards and upwards to the independence of Kosovo. That has not happened now because the Russians have killed the UN resolution. The Serbs saw this as an opportunity to stop any cooperation in the negotiations, and these negotiations have now been quite predictably concluded with a failure. So the Europeans will now have to work very hard to see whether they can muster a united position, and this is by no means an obvious position. You have countries like Greece or Cyprus who clearly back the Serbian position. You have countries such as Slovakia, very concerned about the Hungarian minority, who don't like the idea of separatism. I don't have to insist why Spain doesn't like the idea of separation either. So there are good and bad reasons why a number of European players are less than enthusiastic about Kosovo independence.
But is the time for talking really over now? The EU says it is, the US says it is. Russia clearly wants talks to carry on.
Yes, no, I think the time for talking is now over. It was already over at the beginning of the summer. There was an extension of another 4 months. Clearly, the Serbs are very intransigent. Kosovo is part of Serbia. There's nothing to discuss. We can discuss autonomy, but not independence. And the Albanians reply, well, we are prepared to give autonomy to the Serbian minority in Kosovo, but we don't want to compromise our independence. So the positions are really diametrically opposed. And the question is, can the international community produce, what kind of alternatives can it produce to this stalemate? Because you have the risks of unilateral independence recognized by United States and few Europeans. That means the Serbs, and particularly the Serbian minority in Kosovo,
has
an opportunity to steer a lot of trouble there.
Well, you mentioned just now the number of countries within Europe who are hesitating about recognizing Kosovo's independence, but there must be fear too amongst the other countries about the consequences, the possible consequences of recognizing Kosovo's independence too soon. Many will remember Croatia back in 1991 and what early recognition of Croatia led to.
Exactly. So I think the basic dilemma is legally Kosovo is supposed to be part of Serbia. Politically, morally, if you want, after what has happened during the Milosevic years, this is untenable. So you have this real political dilemma that we have to confront. And clearly the Europeans insisting in all the international issues on the legal, on the issue, on the UN, on the compromise. So the Europeans clearly want an agreement. But if there is no agreement, they will have to face the consequences. And one of the consequences would be that the Europeans might have to perpetuate some form of international protectorate while a solution is found. Because if the Albanians declare unilateral independence, the international presence in the area will be all the more needed. It is needed now, but it will be all the more needed to preserve the security of the area.
What sort of a reaction could we expect in the event of a unilateral declaration of independence from Kosovo from the Serbs?
I think there is the risk there that Serbia will do the utmost to prove that Kosovo independence means instability and possibly violence. It's not too difficult to foment few incidents, and we have seen in 2004 that this can happen. So there will be clearly a high-risk period after declaration of independence. There is yet another option, which is the Serbs bidding for partition of Kosovo. There is a northern enclave in Kosovo around Mitrovica, where most of the Serbs live. And this instability in Kosovo may be a ploy for the Serbs to say, listen, we have yet another solution which has not been discussed, and that is partition. And clearly this would not be a glorious end to the Kosovo negotiations for the international community, but some might consider it a sort of realistic compromise.
And that's where we're going to have to end it, I'm afraid. That's all we have time for today. Thanks to our guest, Jacques Rupnik. Join us again tomorrow for another edition of Top Story. Goodbye.